My name is Emily. I am a freelance editor with Editage, and Editage is a global company that helps researchers, authors, corporations, various institutions to improve their writing and publish their research. Today, I'm going to share some tips with you to improve your writing for your dissertation. I mostly work with authors or students, professors, scholars for whom English is a second language. So a lot of the tips today will be geared towards that audience. But even if you are a native English speaker or if you grew up learning English from a young age, I hope that a lot of these tips will also help you. So let's see, moving on. So just a little bit about Editage. Editage is the world's foremost academic solutions partner. They work with researchers, journals, publishers, various institutions, also corporations at the global level. Okay. So when I receive a paper for the first time, I just do a quick read through of the abstract and the first few pages just to get an idea of the author's writing style and the topic. And usually the author also requests that the paper be formatted based on the requirements of a specific journal. And some journals require that your manuscript be blinded, meaning that you should remain anonymous for the reviewer. And in that case, I would recommend using the passive voice. However, some journals actually request that the author use the active voice. Now, what is the active voice and what is the passive voice? As you can see in this image of the McDonald's logo, the slogan for McDonald's is "I'm loving it" from the song. I'm loving it anyway. So in this case, I'm loving it is in the active voice. And then here you can see the sentence changed to the passive voice. It is being loved by me. So what is the difference between these two ways that you can express yourself in writing and also in academic writing? So in the active voice, the subject of the sentence is the person, thing, agent that is doing the action. For example, the dog bit the man. Whereas in the passive voice, the emphasis is on the subject receiving the action. So here we have the man was bitten by the dog. Now, personally, I do prefer the active voice. I think it makes your writing easier to understand. It also tends to make your writing more concise, which is especially helpful if you are submitting your paper to a journal that has a word limit or a page limit. And in general, the active voice it creates a more dynamic flow. It makes your writing more interesting, I think. Now, the passive voice does have its place, and a lot of the time, you can't use the active voice, especially if the journal that you're submitting your paper to requires that your paper be blinded. So the passive voice, again, you can use it if you want to emphasize the action over the subject, and also if you want to anonymize, or if you don't want anybody to know who performed a certain action. So again, I would check with whatever journal you're submitting your paper to. If some journals don't have a preference for the active voice or the passive voice, and you're free to choose. But I would double check with the journal. And down here, assuming this presentation will be available to you later, I've included a resource on the active voice and the passive voice. However, if you just go to Google or Bing or whatever your preferred search engine is and type in active voice and passive voice, you'll get a lot more examples. Okay. So the second issue that I tend to encounter quite frequently in academic papers written by non-native English speakers is references to geographic places. Now, for some papers, It's, depending on the topic and the journal that you submit your paper to, your audience or the readers of your paper might belong to a very small group of people that are very familiar with the topic, and you might not need to specify terminology or locations as much for them. However, I would generally suggest to err on the side of caution, because one of your future readers, for example, might be a student that is not as familiar with the topic or geography of your context. And for this reason, I always suggest specifying if a location is a city or a province or a village, just the type of place that it is. Now, this is not always necessary if the place is already very well known. For example, most people know that London is the capital of the UK, that, Berlin is the capital of Germany, Beijing is the capital of China. So for very well-known places like that, you don't need to say, the city of London or the capital of the UK, because most people would know. But for more minor places, for example, I read papers all the time where it might say, the present study was conducted in Guangzhou, China. I don't speak Mandarin, so please pardon my pronunciation. Now, as a Western reader or someone who's not very familiar with China, I've never been there. Personally, I don't know where Guangzhou is. I don't know if it's a province or a village. I did a quick Google search and I found out that it's a city. So in this case, you can just add small clarifications like the present study was conducted in the city of Guangzhou, China. And that helps the reader have a better visualization of where your study is being conducted. It helps them contextualize the topic better. Now, another issue that I tend to encounter in terms of geography is writers including words like city or village or town in the official name of a place. Now, I'm aware that in some languages, like in Japanese or Korean, that they have grammatical markers that tell you if a place is a city or is a village or whatever kind of geographic unit that it is. But when you're translating those names into English, or when you're writing them in English, please do not include words like city or village attached to the place name unless those words are an official part of the name. For example, Mexico City, the word city is officially part of the name of that place, but nobody says Paris City. So in this case, you could flip the words around a little and say the city of Paris. Again, Paris is very well known, so you wouldn't need to do that. But if you were specifying a smaller geographic location that is not as well known. And if you're not sure exactly how to, depending on the country you're talking about, some countries have provinces, some have states, some have departments. They might have different names for how they refer to their geographic locations. Just do a quick Google search or whatever search engine you prefer. Wikipedia is also a good source for learning about geography. I would not recommend Wikipedia for regular citations, but if it's just a quick, if it's for your own knowledge, then it's okay to use for quick references like that. Okay, so this issue is relevant to anybody, whether you're a native English speaker or not. And I think there can be some confusion around what does it mean to directly cite a quote? What does it mean to paraphrase? And what is plagiarism? So let's just go over the basic definition of plagiarism. I'm sure everyone is aware, but just to clarify it, because it's a very important issue in academic writing. And if you plagiarize something, whether knowingly or unconsciously, your paper could be rejected by a journal. There might be academic sanctions from your university. So it's a very important issue to be aware of. So plagiarism is basically when you are claiming an idea as your own, or even if not intentionally, demonstrating that an idea or a phrase comes from your own mind without properly citing the source of that idea or that phrase. So if you are going to include a direct quote from a source, please make sure to use quotation marks and cite your source appropriately. I encounter a lot of papers where, probably because the authors are trying to finish their papers quickly, they might forget to include the quotation marks, or they only include the quotation marks at the beginning of the quote. And so then I don't know where the quote ends and I have to guess. So please just double check your quotes and make sure that you're putting the quotation marks in the appropriate places. For example, here we have, according to Gonzalez, 2009, Japan implemented strict COVID-19 prevention measures to stop the spread of the virus. So this is a sentence I made up. It doesn't come from anywhere, but this is an example of how you would properly cite a source without plagiarizing. These words, if you were to hypothetically search for these imaginary words, you would find them in the actual paper written by Gonzalez. Again, this is not a real example. Now, what is paraphrasing? So paraphrasing is a way, like let's say you already have a lot of quotes in your paper and you don't want your paper to just be filled with quotes. You can still refer to another author's ideas and you can cite them, but you can use your own words. So for example, based on the first sentence, the second sentence has the same meaning. It's just a different way of saying the same thing. So here I changed the words to Japan took strong preventive steps to make sure that the COVID-19 virus was contained. So here I used my own words to refer to someone else's idea or some information that I got from another source. Paraphrasing, it can be a little tricky to get the hang of, but it's a great way to actually improve your own writing. You can play with the words, you can be a little creative. And when I say creative, I mean still conveying the same information, not changing the meaning of the information, but you can change the words that you use, and you can, for example, you can use the active voice or the passive voice. So you can be creative in how you paraphrase. Now, most journals have a basic statement about plagiarism, but just be sure that before you submit your paper that you briefly review the journal's submission and formatting guidelines. They might have certain rules about quotations. For example, if a quote is over 40 words, they will often require that you place that quote in a separate area, like that you put it after a paragraph without quotation marks. So just be sure that you check those submission requirements. And again, please remember to include quotation marks. Okay, so another issue that I encounter, and this again is an issue that can apply to whether you're a native English speaker or not, is redundancy. What is redundancy? So there's a difference between repetition and redundancy. Repetition can actually be useful if you know how to use it in the right way. You can often use repetition to emphasize a point that you've already made. However, redundancy happens when you continue to repeat the same word or idea and it doesn't add any substance to your paper. It just restates what has already been said. Now, sometimes I don't know for sure, but I suspect that some writers might include redundant information if they're trying to fill the space on a paper. Please don't do that. It's better to leave your paper shorter and to not be redundant. Now, what are some ways that we can reduce redundancy? One way is the use of synonyms. What is a synonym? A synonym is a different word that has the same meaning or a similar meaning, and you can use synonyms to make your writing more interesting. For example, if you keep using the same words, the reader might get bored. So you can use synonyms to make your writing more interesting. And also to increase your own vocabulary. Okay. So let's see, some very simple examples of synonyms are small and little, or big and large, or pretty and beautiful. However, please be sure to not confuse the use of synonyms with a lack of consistent terms, especially if your topic is technical or scientific in nature. There might be terms in your paper that need to stay the same throughout the paper so that the person reading your paper will understand that those terms always have the same meaning. Especially if you're expecting your audience to consist of people who work in your industry or your sector. I've included a link that it goes to a website that explains more information about how you can ensure consistency in your paper. Another way that you can ensure consistency is if you have a list of terms or words that you definitely want to stay the same throughout the paper, consider sending a list of those terms along with your paper to the editor so that the editor knows, hey, these terms are specific to my industry or specific to this topic and they need to stay the same. Another way to reduce redundancy is take a quick read through your paper after you've written it and just try to notice if you're repeating the same ideas or pieces of information, and ask yourself, is it necessary to repeat this information? Okay. All right. Okay, so this is an issue that is specific to non-native speakers of English. Once in a while, I encounter a paper that I read through the whole paper and I can just tell that the writer used a machine translation tool for the entire paper. Now, AI is becoming more advanced and it can be a very useful tool. So I don't want you to think that you should never use Google Translate or other machine translation tools. I think now I have, I'm not sure if this was mentioned in my biography, but I also have a master's degree in translation. I speak Spanish and I've also studied Arabic and some other languages. So Google Translate and other machine translation tools, I would recommend them for certain terms or short phrases or sometimes even a single sentence, but please don't use these tools for entire paragraphs or the entire paper, because I suspect that writers might think that that using a machine translation tool for the entire paper will make things easier in the long run for both them and the editor. But often, the AI tools are advancing, and maybe one day I'm sure they will advance to where we don't have to worry about these things as much. But a lot of the time they produce literal translations, and these tools are not yet able to take nuance and context into account. So, for example, in this picture on the left, you see the translation in English says there is no place, like this place doesn't exist. I speak Spanish, so I can tell you that what this sign means, no hay lugar, it means there's no more room. So it's probably talking about a parking lot where there are no more spaces for cars to park, that the parking lot is full, or that there are no more vacancies. I don't speak Mandarin, or I think this is Japanese. Slip carefully. This is kind of a funny translation. It's obviously, we understand that it's telling us to be careful when we walk. Maybe the floor is slippery, but it sounds a little funny. And then I'm assuming this sign, I don't speak Mandarin, but I'm assuming it's talking about not walking on the grass or the lawn. It's also quite humorous. So it doesn't mean, I'm not saying don't use machine translation tools, just be careful in how you use them and try to use them for short phrases or single sentences versus your entire paper. Okay. So here I have included a couple of links to Purdue University. So I really like these. Maybe I'll open one up to show you. So I really like the Purdue University website because it gives clear examples for how to format citations and how to cite your sources in APA style, American Psychological Association. APA style, it's a very common style that people use for citing their sources in academic writing. And I really like this website because it gives you, examples for in-text citations, one author, two authors. It gives you examples for how to cite other types of references like electronic sources. And then it also includes, let me see if I can find it. Somewhere on this website, oh, a sample paper. This is what I wanted to show you. So if you are submitting your paper to a journal, that requires you to submit the paper not only with your references formatted based on APA, but your entire paper. This website actually shows you what a sample paper should look like. So I think it's just a really useful source. Let me see, I'm just gonna go back. Okay, so those are the end of my basic tips. Thank you for attending my presentation.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more academia related content, then please subscribe to the PhD Place YouTube channel.